Tina Peters has lost in court again. Today, a federal magistrate judge tossed out her habeas petition challenging her prison sentence, saying the whole thing needed to play out in the state courts first. It's the latest in a string of legal defeats for the former Mesa County clerk who tampered with voting systems in an unsuccessful search for proof of President Trump's election rigging claims. Now, her legal team is asking Trump to pardon Peters. We've talked about this here before. Legal experts insist Trump cannot pardon somebody on a state-level crime, but Peters' attorney wants Trump to try it and then have it decided by the conservative majority on the Supreme Court.
No matter what the judge says, we go to the Court of Appeals, and no matter what the Court of Appeals says, it's going to be in the lap of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Because whoever loses, if Colorado loses, they'll go. If you lose, you'll go. So it's got to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, correct?
It's got to go all the way. And there we've got a majority that are fundamentalists.
That same attorney for Tina Peters has also endorsed the idea of a military raid to free her from the prison in Pueblo, has also talked about trying judges for treason against America. So, I mean, by that measure, a possibly illegal presidential pardon sounds downright reasonable. Until you run it by a constitutional scholar. Our Marshall Zellinger did that.
The 9-page document Tina Peters' attorney sent to President Trump seeking a pardon has all the buzzwords to get the president's attention: stolen election, Dominion, Venezuela. It also contains, well, a bunch of,
factual inaccuracies, procedural inaccuracies, and legal inaccuracies, all of which would seem to undermine a request for a presidential pardon.
Constitutional law attorney Jessica Smith reviewed the letter, particularly the part that says the question of whether a president can pardon for state offenses has never been raised in any court.
My initial review, just to do a gut check to make sure that I wasn't crazy, was about 10 seconds and confirmed that they were not correct.
Of the several cases she found by, searching any legal database, she found a federal appeals case that cited an 1878 U.S. Supreme Court decision.
They are quoting the U.S. Supreme Court saying, if there is no offense against the laws of the United States, there can be no pardon by the president. There were a handful of other cases that I saw. There was one out of Louisiana. There was one in the Seventh Circuit, all of which that said the presidential pardon extends only to federal offenses.
But let's say President Trump were to announce a pardon for Tina Peters, even though she was not convicted of any federal offense. What then?
It would take a presidential pardon and then some sort of court proceeding in either state or federal court where she would need to argue that the presidential federal pardon applies to Colorado's state crimes.
There is a risk if the president could start pardoning for state crimes, depending on who is president.
I can imagine that there are a handful of Republican governors around the country who would be really disappointed to learn that if a Democrat were sitting in the White House, that they could pardon the state law crimes in, say, Florida or Texas.
When you apply the reverse, that's when this gets tricky. It's also a test of federalism, state versus federal authority. But ultimately, Kyle, maybe Peters is just seeking a court case to get the Supreme Court to consider if presidential power should now extend to pardoning for state crimes.
I mean, it's fascinating. They truly are trying every single door to get her out. And it's fascinating the way that they, at the same time, are contemplating, I guess, very formal legal challenges with just gonzo things like send in SEAL Team 6 and yank her out of the prison.
I guess it's a positive for her that we're continuing to talk about her. I mean, how many prisoners do we talk about weekly on the news to the point where it's like, oh, she's out now? Okay, whatever.
Yeah. And of course, the reason this matters is if the president can march into a prison in Colorado and free his friends, then suddenly we live in a very different country. All right, Marshall Zellinger, thank you.